Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Expanse Season 3, Episode 2, IFF. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of The Expanse, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for The Expanse up to Season 3, Episode 2. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, this video will not contain spoilers from the novels, so if you haven't read the novels, you will be safe from spoilers, but I will have a spoiler section at the end of the video for those who have, but I will give a proper spoiler warning before doing so. So this was a pretty intense episode. We got some of the best space battle sequences we've ever seen on this show. It was super intense with Draper trying to dodge the UN attack ship in her racing ship without killing Avasarala, but things got even more intense when the Rocinante got involved. The music, the cinematography, the effects, everything in these sequences were just top notch. And on top of that, we get some great character scenes that flesh out the story more, including the introduction of an interesting new character, Pastor Anna, who adds an interesting dynamic to the show and whom I can't wait to see more of. On top of that, we get more insight into Jules Pierre Mal and the operation he's running with the proto-molecule hybrids. However, the episode isn't what I call perfect, but it was damn good. So let's start with the introduction of Pastor Anna. Much like in Season 2 when Bobby Draper was introduced at the start when they were still dealing with the Book 1 material, even though in the novel she wasn't introduced until Book 2, this season they also introduced Pastor Anna a bit earlier, as in the novel she isn't introduced until Book 3, so we do get her a bit early here as we're still dealing with the Book 2 storyline. Also in the novel, she wasn't a friend of Secretary General Gillis. That was a trait of a different character that they seem to roll into her. But I really like the change. I think it adds a lot to the dynamic that's going on Earth, which I am very excited to see more of. So we get an introduction that is great at portraying what kind of character she is, as she's being treated like a VIP, a high up important person, and yet she's more comfortable sticking up for the little guy and relating to them on a personal level, as we get the giant protest outside the UN headquarters and how the guards violently beat them back when she's not at all okay with this. Now, the protest itself I think was a really nice touch that helps with this world feel more realistic, because there being a war against Mars, it's natural that there be mass protests, and this protest was massive. And much like in real life, anti-war protests, the protesters are absolutely right that the war is being fought to further the ambitions of a few corrupt politicians and is a destructive negative force that should be stopped. Also, I like the implication that Anna has been to many protests before, because when she asked the injured protester if this was his first protest, he says yes, and asks her the same question, and she responds that she's been to a few. So yeah, this establishes has a totally different kind of character for this political landscape. So we learn that she has been a friend or associate of the Secretary General. He still holds her in high regard, but she doesn't seem to share his feelings, as she's obviously unhappy in the direction his career went. And when he asks her to work with him again on his public image and selling the war to the public, she doesn't want to, but agrees to in exchange for Gillis funding her charity work where they provide medical treatment to undocumented immigrants. And again, this really defines her character, that she provides relief for others, and that's her top priority, and she's even willing to support a man she'd rather not in order to accomplish this outcome. But we later learn more specifically about her background when one of the other speechwriters approach her, and he has a recording of her, which is apparently, the recording is apparently Gillis's most iconic speech, one in which he stated the aide stated he had to learn in school, and apparently Anna wrote that speech. However, she describes it as she shares the blame. So it's obvious that she isn't happy with the effects of the speech and what came after it, and feels guilty over it. But what's more interesting to the current story is to see her interactions with Ehrenreich, as she immediately doesn't like him and makes it clear that she's not okay with the kinds of tactics that he's promoting, which makes sense because he is at the heart of the corruption involved in the war. So last week I talked about how Admiral Souther and Avasarala are gone, and Gillis doesn't have anyone with any sense to advise him, leaving him alone to be corrupted by Ehrenreich. But now it seems that Anna is there to be the voice of reason to Gillis, and perhaps will be the one to stand up to Ehrenreich. We also learn more about her personally, as she runs a modest church, and we see her having a Skype call with her wife and their daughter. Now, I'm not sure if that came off super clear in the scene that the woman she was talking to is her wife, but if the show is true to the books, which in this case I think it is, then that is her wife and their daughter. Which, if you think about it, is quite a visionary concept for the future, that there will be a priest who runs a Christian church who is not only a woman, but a lesbian, a concept that unfortunately currently is considered practically unheard of. So I like this subtle vision of the future where things like this will be commonplace. And I do wonder if the show will receive some backlash from the religious extremists because of this, but probably not, because this was subtle enough, and The Expanse unfortunately is not popular enough, but we'll see. So, we also get to catch up with Jules Pierre Mal in this episode as he travels to his outpost on Io, the very same where Holden and the others are headed to, so it seems like he's very correct that this is the headquarters that are being used to create the proto-molecule hybrids. So we follow Dr. Strickland, who's running the project, and if you recall from Season 2, he was the pediatrician who stole Prax's daughter May from him in the first place, and he's obviously working with Protogen the whole time to refine these hybrids. So it's interesting to see him interact with May, as he's obviously very good with children and does his best to calm her and comfort her, but it's really just an act. I always love when someone immediately drops their smile as soon as the other person leaves the room. That's a clear indication that it's all just an act, such as when Strickland was smiling at May, but as soon as she leaves, his smile instantly disappears. I think that was a nice touch. It was also interesting getting his interactions with Jules Pierre Mal, who is obviously his boss, and so he tries to suck up to him, but Mal isn't in the mood at all and is quite adversarial. So we get some interactions with Mal which are quite fascinating, as he expresses doubt over the project and isn't too keen on Ehrenreich using the protomolecule hybrids to wipe out Mars. Further, he doesn't believe the protomolecule can be controlled and is afraid what it might do to humanity. So unlike Ehrenreich, it seems he seems to understand the danger that they're in, has a substance powerful enough to turn an asteroid into a targeted missile is not something to take lightly. This may redefine how a lot of people see this character, as he's not as power hungry or ignorant as Ehrenreich and does understand, at least to some degree, the power that he's messing with and the dangers of humanity being wiped out by this war, which is not at all what he wants. But, on the other hand, he still underestimates the protomolecule, as Dr. Strickland convinces him that he can control it using the children with this rare genetic disorder. And of course it shows how moralist he is, that he has no compunction over using children who may die or turn into monsters in order to control the protomolecule and become more powerful. The scene where May is talking to her friend who's all excited about being cured and thinks that it's cool that his arm is turning blue was a really effectively creepy scene, especially when juxtaposed with Mal being excited about the exploitation of these children and orders them to go ahead with the experiments. So make no mistake, Strickland and Mal are despicable people, no doubt about it. But another thing I found interesting about these scenes were seeing how Mal responded to Ehrenreit's demands for the weapon that he wants, as he tells him that he'll get his weapon once his assets are unfrozen and his family is left alone and not 1 minute before. Because Mal does hold all the cards and is not one to be pushed around, and he's made that clear in the past. But it does make me wonder what Ehrenreit's play will be, because in his scene we see the others talking about getting Mal and that there's a bounty on his head, and Ehrenreit plays along with this. So it seems to me Ehrenreit couldn't just unfreeze his assets without revealing that he's his ally, and yet Mal won't play ball unless he does. So I suspect some scheme is afoot where Ehrenreit will try to unfreeze his assets, but in a way that doesn't appear like he's on his side. Like he'll come up with an excuse or a plan to get Mal that just so happens to involve unfreezing his assets and letting his family go. I don't know. I'm very curious to find out where they'll take this storyline. So now let me cut over to Avasarala and Bobby. There's not much to say about the storyline other than it was really exciting. This is where we get a lot of tense music and great space scenes as they try to evade Ehrenreit's UN destroyer and Julie Mal's racing ship. But the thing about these scenes that made them really great was the interactions between Draper and Avasarala, as these two have a lot of great chemistry, as Avasarala tries to use humor in her curmudgeon nature to hide how terrified she is. As I said in last week's review, Avasarala is completely out of her element and Bobby is totally in her element, and that's still true in this episode. Although Bobby is a little outside of her element here too, as although she can pilot a ship, that isn't her primary function. And I love how this is pointed out when Avasarala asks if she's a good pilot, to which she responds no, she's a Marine that is usually flown to places by other pilots. However, Draper is comfortable in combat situations and in high G combat. And that's something I love about the storyline, something that's kind of unique to The Expanse that we don't get in a lot of other space-based science fiction shows, and that it plays up the importance of gravity, particularly when traveling through space at high speeds. Draper has trained for it her whole life and is so able to withstand it, but Avasarala had zero experience with it, never really having left Earth before, so was very susceptible to the high speeds that they were traveling at. That and her age certainly plays a factor. So this was an amazing through story. The underlining tension, if you will, is that Bobby wants to fly fast to evade the destroyer, but by doing so, she's putting Avasarala's life in danger at risk of being killed by the high G pressure, and that is extremely possible. So the banter between them was a nice touch, as mainly Draper was trying to safeguard Avasarala, but she was trying to distract herself. But ultimately, the high speeds did prove too much for her, and Draper had to slow to the speeds that would mean the destruction if it had not been for the Rocinante's intervention. But that does speak a lot to Draper's character, that she was willing to die herself and with the UN ship destroying them, rather than risk killing Avasarala by speeding away. So it shows her whole attitude was that they both make it alive, or neither one of them do, which says a lot about her character. Also, this is exemplified through dialogue when Avasarala points out the irony that a Martian Marine is willing to die to save her life, and Draper points out that they're both on the same side, the right side. Which just goes to show how far Draper's character has come, as at the start of Season 2, she was still all gung-ho about going to war with the UN and wiping out all Earthers, to now where she's willing to die to protect a high-ranking UN official. A really great character arc. So, these scenes feature a lot of great cinematography, none the least being where the Razorback docks with the Rocinante and we get Avasarala's POV where Draper takes her across into space, which was just visually stunning, and the scene where Bobby's holding Avasarala's limp body in the Rocinante Bay where she simply says she needs help was a really beautiful shot. So overall, really stunning sequences. Now, at one stage, Bobby does say, "I'm sorry about Kotiar," and Avasarala asks if she killed him, and then says, "Well, forget your sorries then," which implies that they both think that he's dead. But that's because they didn't see the dropship. But we know that the dropship did launch, so I'm pretty confident that he did, in fact, make it out alive. In fact, I was wondering before how the dropship would make it from the UN destroyer, but now we have our answer. The destroyer was too preoccupied with going after the Razorback, and then it had its engines destroyed by the Rocinante, so now I'm pretty confident that he got away to live another day. So finally, let me get to the Rocinante crew, and yes, I'm still calling it that. I hope this whole Concorta thingy is temporary. Anyway, we see the crew preparing to go to Io, where Prax makes himself useful by using plants to enhance their oxygen supply, when Alex receives Bobby's distress call, which he refers to as coming through on the IFF, which he explains stands for Identify Friend or Foe. Now, Bobby sent this signal out on her seat, so it's not very strong and can only be picked up by Martian vessels, which means that it's unlikely anyone else picked up that message, and they were lucky that the Rocinante is still technically a Martian ship, and of course lucky that it just so happened to be nearby. However, receiving the distress call creates a divide in the crew, as Alex really wants to go rescue these Martians, whom at this stage they have no idea who they are, and Naomi agrees, but Holden really doesn't want to go, and Amos sides with him. Then instinctively, I'm really on Alex's side, because I know the people that he wants to rescue are Bobby and Avasarala, whom I want to see survive. However, even when trying to separate that, I still can't help but be on Alex's side and actually find that Holden's behavior here is kind of out of character for him. I can see his perspective a bit, that they're being a war on and they can't just waste time following every distress call and trying to save everyone. But I think Alex has a great counter-argument that he and Naomi seem to be able to do whatever the hell they want, but this time Alex really wants to do something, and they shouldn't just ignore him, but that's exactly what Holden tries to do. Also, I don't know if I follow Holden's reasoning that he just got out of helping everyone business, because that wasn't his issue. His issue was that he was obsessed with hunting down the protomolecule. In fact, he stopped doing that so he could save the Weeping Somnambulist, which was filled with refugees from Ganymede. In other words, helping people. So it seems out of character for him to all of a sudden not want to help people. But this gets way worse when it's revealed that the ship that is in danger is in fact Julie Mal's ship, the Razorback. Now, they don't go into detail here, but the implication is that whoever is on the ship likely knows something about the protomolecule or is connected to it somehow, as Jules Pierre Mal is the man behind the experiments. So this could help them with whatever they want to do on Io. This could in fact help them retrieve Prax's daughter safely, which is what Holden says he wants to do. So I can't help but see this divide in the crew as artificial and just a contrived way to create tension, and that Holden is in fact acting out of character for purposes of the plot. Amos, however, is totally in character, but that's another story. Anyway, Prax apparently breaks the tie as he elects to go rescue the Martians, and Amos grills him about this. Why would he waste his time to rescue people he doesn't know? And Prax explains that they're doing the same thing for him, so he should do the same for others, which to me is a perfectly good explanation. That makes all the sense in the world, because I agree. Prax would be a bit of a hypocrite if he's not willing to do for others what others are willing to do for him. However, it's revealed that this wasn't his real motivation, as Amos calls bullshit on this, and Prax reveals that he's delaying the rescue attempt for May because he's too afraid that he'll find her dead, which I actually didn't like, because I think his first explanation makes a lot more sense. Although that being afraid thing can certainly play a factor, but it's implied here that the whole thing about wanting to help people is bullshit, as Amos suggests that it is, and he's convinced that he was just said a bunch of bullshit to hide the fact that he's afraid. So I'd actually like to think it's a bit of both, but ultimately I think the episode would have been much better without the reveal Praxis Fear, because I think his first explanation is actually the better one and fits better with his character, but whatever. However, the actual space battle sequences were amazing. Again, the music and the way it was shot was amazing and made this a truly engaging and intense viewing experience. It was great, showing what a good tactician that Holden is, and that he's able to take on a UNN destroyer much bigger than they are and defeat them with pure tactics. That he was able to shoot these missiles around the Razorback, and whenever the destroyer shot missiles at it, they would just go off and explode and attract the other UN missiles, so leaving the Razorback alone, which was brilliant. As was the awesome maneuver where they were able to create a visual distraction and fly in and just destroy the ship's engines with one shot. That was amazing. However, Holden's wasn't too pleased as they depleted most of their ammunition, and he's right. That is not a good thing in the middle of a war zone, so I do wonder how this will affect things going forward. However, Holden also insists they just declared war on Earth, but that's not actually necessarily the case because the UNN destroyer wasn't on official Earth business and was a rogue working directly for Ehrenreich. If you recall, Secretary General Gillis ordered Avasarella's apprehension, not death. So this is more of an internal conflict. Of course, Holden has no way of knowing this at the time, so it makes sense why he'd say it, but I don't think it's necessarily true. It's probably more accurate to say they just got involved in an internal power struggle. So I actually really liked the part of the battle where loose objects were flying all over the place. Last week I criticized the scene where Draper slipped while she was crawling around the exterior of the ship and nearly fell in the engines as an unnecessary and artificial way to create tension, and some may see this scene in the same sort of light. But I actually think this scene really worked because it shows how inexperienced Prax is at space travel, and again, a realistic use of gravity as something as simple as loose tools could cause a life and death situation. And plus, I thought it was really intense moment to see Amos flying around with the gravity switching back and forth on him as he tries to get to Prax to save him. So I approve of this scene, and I thought it really worked. And I absolutely loved the scene where Draper and Avasarella arrive in docking bay and Holden sees them, and the look on his face is just priceless. Now, they all look shocked because they all know who Avasarella is, as she's a high-ranking UN official. I'm sure they've all seen her on the news before. That, and she was a very public face against the OPA. But with Holden, he actually did have communications with her directly, if not in real time, but direct communication during the Eros incident back in Season 2, where Eros almost crashed into Earth and Holden asked her directly for the use of the UN missiles. So he knows full well who she is, and apparently is not very happy to see her. I'm actually a bit disappointed the episode ends here because I wanted to see more. I wanted to see these two interact, but I gotta be fair, this is a pretty good cliffhanger and a pretty good way to end the episode. As this is an epic moment in the show we've all been waiting for these two characters to meet for the first time, because these two characters have been on the show ever since the very first episode and have yet to come together. So it would be really great to see these two interact. So I cannot possibly be more pumped to see next week's episode. So my rating for IFF out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. Some of the most intense space battles we've ever seen on the show, combined with some great character moments, including a great introduction to a new character and getting to know the bad guys better. However, I did feel some of the Holden stuff was a bit out of character for him, and although I did really like the episode, I wouldn't say it was one of the best the show has ever done, but still a great episode. So that's it for my spoiler-free section of my review of IFF. I will be back next week to review Episode 3, and this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., 4 p.m. Pacific Time, and that would be Monday morning at 11 a.m. for me here in New Zealand. I will be doing a live discussion on this episode where I'll be joined by Apkin Tomko and Darren from D's Reviews, so be sure to join us live in the chat as we break down and discuss this episode further. I'll leave a link in the description below for that video. Also, be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Babylon 5, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching. However, for those who have read the novels, you can stick around for my brief spoiler section of this episode, which begins now. So, one brief thing I want to talk about regarding spoilers is the scene on Earth where Anna is discussing Jules Pierre Mal's family and how, Aaron Wright and all of them want to attack his family. And Anna isn't okay with this because they did nothing wrong, and this obviously really pisses Aaron Wright off because it does make me wonder when Clarissa Mal will be introduced into the story, because we know from the casting news that she will be in season 3, and she of course is a major driving force behind the book 3 storyline. So it seems to me they are setting up for that with all this talk about Mal's family. In this episode, they mentioned that his family were being held, which I didn't realize. I knew that they threatened more action against them, but I didn't know they're actually being held. So it makes me wonder if this is going to be a driving force for why she goes a bit mad. But in the novel, she blames Holden entirely. But here, I wonder if they'll switch focus on that, because Holden's not involved at all in what's happening to her family. But we'll see. Also, it does appear to me that they're setting up Anna to be Clarissa's advocate. As in the novels, there was another character who was a friend of the family, but I suspect she will not be in the show, and instead Anna will fill that role, and they are kind of setting that up here. So the other thing I want to discuss that doesn't really have to do with this episode, but I had heard from several people in comments and stuff that they seem to assume that the book 2 storyline will go until episode 8, and that the book 3 storyline will begin in episode 9, and I do not concur with this conclusion. For one thing, before the season started, I heard some leaks suggest that the book 2 storyline would end in episode 6, and looking at the episode titles for each episode of the season, which I'll assume are accurate, that supports this, as episode 7 is called Delta 5 and episode 8 is called The Investigator. Now, Delta 5, when I looked it up, literally means a change in velocity. And so to me, that is describing the slow zone. So it seems to me this is clearly covering Book 3 material. And The Investigator, of course, refers to Miller's ghost, so definitely a Book 3 storyline. So it seems to me that episode 6 will be the end of Book 2, which is what I heard before, but I really hope this is the case too, because if they go all the way to episode 8 with Book 2, then that really wouldn't leave them much time to cover Book 3 stuff, which I'm actually really excited to see and I want them to get to. So I do think this is the case, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it for my review. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.